Hi, my name is HexJuice, and I'm a VTuber and streamer that loves anime, video games, and having a fun time. Please like and subscribe if you want more content like this, and let me know what you think in the comments. If you want to keep up to date with me and my amazing community, please join my Discord. Links to all of my social media will be in the description of this video. I hope you enjoy! There are a few games that have been released with the same hype as Cyberpunk 2077, and that massive hype for the game definitely caused a lot of people to feel disappointed in what was supposed to be the best game of the decade, myself included. After an insane number of bugs and gameplay issues, Cyberpunk basically became a fad game that few people continued playing for very long after its release in 2020. I personally heard very little regarding Cyberpunk until recently, due to the release of the Cyberpunk Edgerunners anime in September. I had huge expectations for the anime, in part because Studio Trigger has made some of my favorite anime of all time, particularly the director Hiroyuki Imaishi, but also because I think that the best part of Cyberpunk was the story, despite its other issues. The first 6 episodes of Edgerunners lived up to the hype. The story completely captured my attention, and the characters were dynamic and lovable. The art and the animation were everything I would have expected from Studio Trigger and more, and I couldn't wait for what happened next. And then, the time skip. For me, the last 4 episodes of Edgerunners represented a complete waste of all of the potential for what the anime could have and should have been. I was shocked to find so many people in love with the ending, and I couldn't believe how many YouTube videos were titled with exclamations of how devastating the ending was, how incredible it was. I was left at the end of the Edgerunners anime feeling empty, and not in the way that I was reveling in the devastation and sadness in the way only a good anime can make me feel. I just felt empty. All of the themes, all of the character development, all of it was just left unfinished. I won't mince words. The ending of Edgerunners was bad, really bad, but don't come at me with the pitchforks just yet. I want to talk about why I think Edgerunners could have been an incredible anime, but fell short. Hopefully in the end, you'll at least understand my opinion if you don't agree. I want to start by saying that my issue with the Edgerunners ending was not that it was sad. I can totally get into a melancholic and devastating ending to an anime. One of my main issues is that Edgerunners actually had an incredible setup for the last 4 episodes. It just did not follow up on those important plot elements. One of my first issues after the time skip was that we did not see any evidence of David stepping up other than characters telling us he did so. David basically goes from being a scared teenager, unable to pull the trigger, and struggling to understand the harshness of his surroundings, to a completely self-assured, trigger-happy leader that no one questions. The story does a lot of telling here, and not very much showing. We do not get to see how he became a leader, how he gained the trust of his gang, or what experiences led him into becoming the person he was later on in the show. We are just told over and over that he stepped up after Main's death. It made it difficult for me to see David pre-time skip as being the same David after the time skip. In the first 6 episodes, we see a David that is fun, adventurous, naive, and a little wayward. He's eager to please, and after his mom's death, he is desperate to make his way in the world on his own terms. After Main's death, very little of this characterization persists. David becomes serious, battle-hardened, and already has the approval of all of his peers. It's good that characters grow and change in anime, and I would have really appreciated this character development if it was earned. We either needed to see some parts of his journey through the time skip, or we needed flashbacks to see what events led to him changing so significantly. Instead, there just end up being 2 Davids, a silly child and a mature adult. This is made even more severe because of David's descent into cyberpsychosis. He becomes even more withdrawn and is basically reduced to the TV watching man. While it is understandable that this happens because of the cyberpsychosis, it made the necessity of seeing how and why he changed during the time skip even more important. We end up seeing a glimpse of a fully realized, badass adult David, just for him to be taken away before we can appreciate how much he's grown. These issues of character development extend to nearly every character in the show. Lucy is characterized as being aloof and at one point literally betrayed David for the Edgerunners. After Main's death, she is willing to risk her life and dives constantly to keep David safe. This on its own isn't as much of an inconsistency of character development until we consider her actual relationship with David after the time skip. There are several scenes of them being naked in their apartment together, and there's the scene where Lucy reveals her past to David. Taking that into account, they still overall have a shocking lack of meaningful interaction in the last 4 episodes. Lucy is also shown to have a lot more devotion to David than the other way around. Their relationship feels lukewarm and unfamiliar at best with the limited scenes they have together after the time skip. I understood their growing bond before Main's death, but being shown so little of how their relationship developed in between makes it feel really empty in the end. The fact that the entire time skip passed and David seemed to only ask about Lucy's past after that is really weird. There are supposed to be several months that happen in between the time skip. They didn't spend any of that time getting to know each other. This is meant to be the most important relationship of the entire show, and it is deeply underdeveloped. So it feels really unearned when Lucy is the only one who can bring him back from cyberpsychosis, even for a brief time. This is even more confusing when it's made clear that Lucy knew David was slipping into cyberpsychosis. If her entire goal was to not watch him die, and she was so devoted that she was hunting down anyone who knew of his high tolerance to cyberware, why didn't she say anything? Lucy literally watched his mental state degrade without a word until it was too late. If she's the only one at the end who can make him see reason, why didn't she try when she knew David was installing a dangerous amount of cyberware? She watched his hands shaking while he was staring at the TV, knew what it meant, and still said nothing. And this is supposed to be a life-altering soulmate bond. As a viewer, it was hard to wrap my head around why Lucy was so in love with David when she seems to just waste away in her ice bath all day and lay alone naked in bed. Their most meaningful interaction is in the last episode, where they mostly talk about each other. They're only actually together for about 4.5 minutes of the episode, and that's only if you count all of the fighting cutscenes where they aren't actually on screen together. If you count on-screen time, it's about a minute. All of David's relationships seem to be stronger for the other person than for him. Lucy seems much more in love with David than the reverse. And the same goes for David's relationship with Rebecca. Though I might be biased,
Becca best girl.
Becca is the most successfully developed character in Edgerunners. Her characterization is strong throughout the series as a hot-headed, loyal, and caring person. Rebecca is extremely loyal to David and obviously cares deeply for him. She notices the signs of cyberpsychosis in him immediately and is actually the first person to warn David about his cyberware usage. Despite Becca having such a strong relationship with David, he isn't shown to have the same love for her. Most of their interactions are Becca pointing out her worries and trying to support David, with him mostly shrugging her off and ignoring her. Their biggest development is that he entrusts her to give him his meds so that he can delay full cyberpsychosis as long as possible, but this ends up feeling more like an order from a leader than a favor from a friend. This is again a problem of so much being left out after the time skip. If David and Becca's friendship was developed more, and we were shown that they had mutual trust in each other, we could appreciate that he is treating her differently because of the cyberpsychosis. Instead, it comes off as a weird, one-way relationship where David doesn't take Becca's opinion seriously, and she cares way more than he does. This also results in David seeming really ignorant, despite how much the show tells us he's intelligent. He watched Maine become a cyberpsycho. He watched Becca's brother Pilar have his head blown off by a cyberpsycho. If anyone in the show could understand the danger of cyberpsychosis as much as David, it would be Becca. Ignoring the fact that David himself knew that he was falling into cyberpsychosis, it just doesn't feel right that this person who was so smart wouldn't listen to his close friend when she brought up her concerns. If that was enough, they then kill Becca, which on its own isn't the worst sin, but she doesn't even get to fight. She just gets atom smashed, and it's used as a plot device to send David back into cyberpsychosis. Maybe I'm just mad because I loved Becca from her first moment on screen, but I wish her death had meant more and been more an event in the show, rather than something everyone reacts to for a few seconds and is never addressed again. Cyberpsychosis is shown to be incredibly violent, dangerous, and a terrifying condition. Maine's death as a cyberpsycho is meant to be a warning about how awful cyberpsychosis can be. He punches out Kiwi, he kills Dorio, and he decimates dozens of Max Tech and Trauma and police workers. David witnesses firsthand the dangers of overusing cyberware. Why, if he's so intelligent, if he is so broken by watching Maine's decline in death, does he even risk cyberpsychosis? More than that, why does he veritably sprint into the open arms of cyberpsychosis? David was built up over and over again to be special, to be smarter, and to be different in the show. He's a higher tolerance to cyberware compared to others, and he is smart enough to get into the academy and is said to have amazing grades despite being underprivileged. I cannot wrap my head around his motivation to install so much cyberware, even with his high tolerance. I expected that David would actually be really conservative with his cyberware after Maine's death, and would underuse it to avoid possibly hurting Lucy and his friends. Maine literally killed his own lover, and yet David apparently has no qualms about going cyberpsycho despite the inherent risk to others. And we're supposed to believe that his friends are so important to him and that Lucy is so important to him. Two of my biggest issues with the end of Edgerunners are David's willingness to go cyberpsycho and Lucy's choice not to tell David that she is protecting him from Arasaka. For the latter, my primary issue is that I don't understand the decision to make the big secret that Lucy is trying to hide from Arasaka something we already understood in the show. David has a high tolerance to cyberware. When Lucy wipes all the information about David from Tanaka's memory and takes on the fight to keep David safe, we are led to believe that there is something we don't know, that only Lucy knows. I was waiting to find out something incredible about David, that he's immune to cyberpsychosis, that he's already installed with some kind of experimental cyberware that he doesn't even know about, or that he's a vital part of Arasaka completing some evil deed, like taking over another corporation. Instead, he's just a little bit above average on his tolerance to cyberware, and the big secret has actually been known since the second episode. All of this being said, why doesn't Lucy just tell him that Arasaka wants him for this ability? Since he already knows he can handle a lot of cyberware, it doesn't make sense that she hides Arasaka's interest in him. The reality is, if that he had known this information, he could have protected himself and Lucy much better, rather than her sneaking around to do espionage alone with no one knowing where she is. This choice is ultimately a really lazy plot device to catapult the show into its ending. It's not even demonstrated that Lucy keeps the secret to protect David in the show. She just doesn't tell him vital information that could have saved both of their lives. Instead, like in the case of the cyberpsychosis, she says nothing and it sends him flying into incredible danger to save her. I want to take a quick minute to address like a little random list of other nitpicks I have with the show. I don't want to get too into them because the script is getting really long, but I do just have a couple questions. Why were the true villains of the show never connected to the main cast? They never meet them, and the main cast doesn't actually even know that they exist. The Arasaka Asians also don't even exist before the last few episodes. I expected them to somehow be connected to Lucy, or be the parents of somebody that David went to school with. Instead, it's just really weird that they had no connection to the main characters. Why was Faraday set up as being the guy in charge, the super fixer, and then just ended up being another guy trapped in the system? Why not make him the real bad guy, not just another cog in the machine? What is the point of a cyber skeleton that no one can ever reasonably use? Even more so, why do they even need a cyber skeleton if they already have Atom Smasher, who is apparently immune to cyberpsychosis and totally loyal to Arasaka? And finally, I just have to say it, why did they kill Becca like that? Damn. All in all, I think my biggest issue with Edgerunners is that in the end, David is just a regular guy who could handle a little more cyberware for a little longer than other people. I think it is a huge issue that David was neither so special that he could endure, nor so average that it needed to be overcome. Not every anime needs to have a relatable self-insert character or a fantasy fulfillment character. I just struggle to understand the choices made for David narratively. Making him special, but not special enough in the context of the ending was confusing for me. I think for this choice to have worked, there needed to have been some massive struggle that David was built up as being capable of achieving, but despite his best efforts and exceptionalism could not overcome because the system of corporations in Night City was too strong. What we get instead is a story of a guy who had every opportunity and every gift available to avoid the mistakes of his predecessors, who ends up the exact same as them, because I genuinely don't know why. The beginning of Edgerunners sets us up for so many important themes, like learning from generational trauma, making your way outside of the system, and the hardship of growing up in poverty. In the end, we get a half-baked theme that the dealer always wins in Night City. Even if we go with that theme, the system of Arasaka only seems to crush David coincidentally, and not because he was completing any important work or making a difference. He put on the cyberskeleton by choice, he wasn't forced to. Really, the system kind of only won because of David's stupidity and Lucy's unwillingness to help anyone. He was determined to become a cyberpsycho long before Lucy was captured, and before anyone was in any tangible danger. Arasaka just gives him the opportunity to go cyberpsycho even faster. So it's not even by some ingenious design that our hero is defeated, it's just that David had a death wish. The ending of Edgerunners was additionally made meaningless by the fact that not only did we not learn anything of value, but neither did the characters of the show. The only living, relevant character at the end of the show is Lucy, who seems to have gone from aloof and uncaring to aloof and secretly caring to aloof and living on the moon. What is it that Lucy learned from David's death? How did this help her develop as a person? An example of a show that made great use of a character's death at the end was another Trigger and Imaishi show, Kill la Kill. When Senketsu dies at the end of the show, we deeply feel Ryoko's loss because their relationship was developed throughout the 24 episodes. We know how much they care for each other, and Ryoko learns immensely from her relationship with Senketsu. She changes a lot before and after the relationship, and it feels earned because we knew that they cared for each other. In contrast, Lucy and David's relationship was not as well developed, and their choices do not seem to be in each other's best interests throughout Edgerunners. Their relationship feels cold and distant, and so when David dies, any sadness that I might have felt was more because I kind of like David in general, but not because I was really feeling his loss with Lucy. Overall, my disappointment in the end of Edgerunners stems from how much I genuinely loved the first 6 episodes. The characters, animation, and world building were spectacular, and it feels like the last episodes didn't do enough to live up to everything it had built. I think this anime could have used at least 2 more episodes for a normal 12-episode season, but I think they really should have given it even more episodes to really air out the plot. It feels like the first part of the show was written with the assumption that there would be more than 10 episodes, and then the end was rushed to make it shorter. In the end, Cyberpunk Edgerunners was a massive letdown for me, mostly because of the loss of the potential. I wanted more, it could have given more, and we deserved more. That's actually all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for watching my first YouTube video. Please like and subscribe if you'd like more content like this, and let me know if you have any thoughts down in the comments. I hope you are having an incredible day. Thank you very much. Peace.